Before we continue with the ride along, this is an opportune time for us to talk about scope. Variables and constants have a particular scope, and their scope is attached to the method in which they're executing. So if I create a variable called name inside of a method, when the method starts, that variable name will spring into existence. And it's not accessible from any place outside the method, but within that method you can use name. As soon as the method exits, name goes away. So its scope is the method. And unless a variable is passed as a parameter, it's not available to any other methods. So that's an important concept to bear in mind. All right, so let's go ahead and add another feature to this countdown timer program. What I'd like to do is add to the countdown method a sum of all the digits that appear in the countdown. So that'd be pretty straightforward. We'll go ahead and put that in here. Int sum equals 0. And then each time we write line, we'll add to the sum using the shortcut operator from chapter 2, sum plus equals I. So that says take the value of I, add it to sum, and put that value back in sum. Okay, there we go. So now we're keeping the sum of all the digit values that appear when the countdown runs. All right, that's good. Now we've got to figure out what to do with it. Well, what we'd like to do with it is print that value out after the countdown runs. But I think I want to print it in the main method. So no particular reason, but that's where we are going to print it. So what that means is we need to have a way for sum to make it out of countdown into main. Now, as you'll recall, I just talked about variable scope, and there is no way for main to dip into countdown to see what the value of sum is. So sum has to be sent back from countdown to main. And the way that happens is by using a return statement. So here, I'm just going to say return sum, and that should cause the value in sum to be returned to the main program. But take a look here. We've got a red squiggly. Well, why is that? It's because the value to be returned from the method has to be specified in the method header. You might remember that I said that void says that there's no return value for this method, but that if you weren't using void, you'd have to specify the data type of the return value. So we're returning an int, so let's change this to int. Now look at that. Now it says when countdown executes, it takes in this integer, start here. And then when it's all over, it returns an integer. I'll show you how to make use of that in a minute. But now we have a method that takes a parameter and returns a value, and the return value is an int. So here's where we're going to consume that value. I'm going to create another integer here called sum. So we can use the same name, but it's actually a different value. It's references a different memory location. It's a completely different variable because this sum is in the scope of main. This sum is in the scope of countdown. But I can do this now. Sum equals countdown starting point. So what that says is I want to count down from the starting point, and I know that countdown returns an integer. So stick whatever that integer is in here. And if you think about read line, it works the same way. You could do a read line into a string, and the reason for that is that read line is a method of type string, just as countdown is a method of type integer. All right, so now we have the sum available, and we can print it out here. Write line, use string interpolation, sum of the numbers counted down is sum, and I'm going to make it an N0 format specifier, which means that if it gets too big, it'll get commas, and it won't have any decimal points. So let's go ahead and add a blank line after that. Okay, let's give it a shot. So I've just pressed F5. So it wants us to enter a starting point. So I'll put in 3. 3, 2, 1, 0. And then the sum of the numbers counted down is 6. So 3, 2, 1, yep, that's 6. If we did 5, you'd get just what you expect. So 5, 5, 9, 12, 14, 15. Should be 15. There we go. Okay, so now you've got a method that takes a parameter and returns a value. So there's one more enhancement I want to make to the countdown method. At this point, every time you execute, you have to wait 1 second between ticks. What if I don't want to? What if I want to count down from 1,000 and I don't want to wait 1 second per tick? I just want to see it count all the way down. Well, we could do that by introducing a Boolean. And the reason we're doing this is that I want to show you that you can have as many parameters as you want feed into a method. It's just that you could just have one return type unless you do something special. So why don't we go ahead and do that? I'm going to put a Boolean here called useTimer. And then down here we could say if useTimer, then we'll wait a second between ticks. Otherwise, we'll just zip through. So, alrighty, but now this doesn't work anymore because countdown requires 2 parameters. But in order for us to specify what is going to go in that parameter, I think we ought to read it from the from the console. So, how about we do this? I'll create the Boolean, just call it timer. And then after the starting point, we'll just write, do you want to use the timer? And we'll say if readline to upper equals y, and timer equals true, else timer equals false. Oop, forgot my semicolon. All right, so I think we should be good to go. There's timer, timer, timer. So last thing we need to do is send that Boolean to the countdown method. And there we go. So everything looks good. I don't see any squigglies. So now countdown is consuming 2 parameters, still producing an integer, which is this sum. So let's go ahead and execute. Enter a starting point, 3. You want to use the timer? Sure. 3, 2, 1, 0. And the sum is 6. Let's try again. This time, we'll use 100. You want to use the timer? No, not this time. I don't want to wait 100 seconds. And there we go. It counted down to 100 and provided us the correct sum. So that's it for basic methods. Now we're going to move on to a little more advanced topic.